Several months ago, I published a blog article on the use of the router in rounding over the corners of my bandsaw boxes and the fronts of the drawer. And since then, I've had some questions about the use of the router, and people, I guess, have run into some difficulty here and there. And so I've decided to put together this little short video to maybe answer some of those questions rather than trying to write out the explanation each time. I do use a router bit. This is a 5/32 round over with a roller bearing on the top. And I use this one so that if I'm, for example, here's a drawer that I'm in the process of working with. I put the router bit follows the wood and then cuts the shape that I want underneath it, but I just have to make sure that I follow that router, and then that will control the depth of cut here. Oh, when you go ahead and set this up, the first thing, of course, we're going to mount the router bit into the router table. Then we need to adjust the router bit up and down so that it's in the proper location. So take a piece of flat wood, make sure that you come in right underneath, right flush with the tip of your cutter. Now, if you get the router bit too high, you're going to end up with a cut and then a groove and take out some of the top material, which of course is going to ruin your drawer or your box. If you're too low, you just barely clip the edge. So then now instead of a smooth round, you've got a flat surface and a flat surface and a flat surface, and it's not smooth. If you get this just right, then now you've got a rounded surface that goes flush from one around to the other. So make sure that when you set it up, even though it may take several times to adjust it up and down just a little bit each time, get it right before you start, and you'll end up with a nice round surface, and it'll look a lot better, and of course I'll save you some work. The other thing, when you'll notice this router bit, the cutting edge here is turning. In order to cut, it has to go counterclockwise like this. So if you bring your wood in here, it's going to cut, and then you'll move the wood, and it'll cut, and it keeps cutting into areas that are already cut. So you'll get a smooth cut as long as you go along in it's fairly smooth time. You don't want to go too fast; it'll be uneven. You stop and let it sit there, and go too slow, and it may burn your wood. So just at a good clip, keep it going, but hang on to it, because that bit is turning and pulling on the wood. Every time it turns around, it pulls on the wood. Now this bit, of course, is only taken out, 5/32 of an inch, and it's not going to pull real hard. But if you're turning a, say 3/8 inch or half inch bit, it's taking a lot of material, and it will shoot that board right out of there. And of course, where your fingers are going to go, they're going to go right into the router bit. So be careful, take it and make sure you're doing it, holding on to it good and tight when you're working. Also, one thing to watch, as I say, when you're going with the grain, you want to go with the rotation. If you come back against the rotation, you're now cutting into raw wood, and you can chip out a chunk of wood. Maybe you've had that same experience with a jointer or planer. If you run against the grain, it'll actually chip the wood. Well, the same thing applies here. So you want to make sure that you're going with the grain when you're going with the rotation, when you're going with the grain. Now, if you're going to cut the end grain, now I go against the rotation there, because I get a better cut and I can hold on to it and get a little bit more better control. So going long grain, I go with the rotation. Going across the grain, I go against the rotation. So one other thing that I think I need to mention is make sure that when you're doing your drawer, that your material is thick enough that it actually rolls on the roller. So if you're on the roller, then the router bit can't cut any deeper than what the roller will allow it to cut. Now, if you've got a thin surface, like here's a box that I cut the drawer pretty thin, and it will actually go underneath that roller. So it's going to cut deeper into the wood than what I want it to. Well, that may not be a problem in that case because I can sand it, but what about a drawer like this with these dividers? Here I'm going to cut too deep, come around, cut too deep, and of course it'll go around the roller, cut too deep, and then I've got a mess. So it's important that when you make sure your drawer is thick enough that you're on the roller. Stay on the roller all the time and control the depth of the cut. I think those are the main things that I wanted to mention is make sure that you're adjusted up and down properly so you get a good smooth cut. Go with the grain when you're cutting, with the rotation and with the grain. If you're going a cross grain, then you can go against the rotation. And of course, make sure that your work is against the roller at all times. So give it a try. It works out really good for me. I think it'll work for you as long as you're careful. I think the important thing is that it's easy. It takes saves a lot of time and gives you a nice looking edge to your box. Now, for example, this I think as a face looks better than if it was square. So anyway, give it a try, and thanks for watching.